A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee his or her country by persecution, war, or violence. In most countries, they have no basic human rights. According to United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or UNHCR, there are approximately 14,000 refugees living in Indonesia alone. I am one of them, and this is my story. My name is Abdullah. I'm the third born in my family, and I have 4 other siblings, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. I am from the Afghan tribe of Hazara, which has suffered a slow genocide for over a century now. 62% of my tribe has been oppressed, afflicted with racism and bigotry, slain, persecuted, simply because we look different and we are from a minority religion. However, most of the world has not heard of this genocide. The majority of my people now live in exile, as subhumans, in desolate corners of the world, erased, sidelined. However, most of the world has not heard of this erasure. So I often ask myself these questions. Where is home for me? Where is home for us? For as long as I can remember, my family has been on the move. We had to move to survive. My parents are originally from Afghanistan, but they had to flee the country 20 years ago due to safety and security concerns. They fled to Quetta, Pakistan, where I was born. Soon after, we were on the move again, this time traveling to Iran, and that is where I grew up. One of my earliest childhood memories from Iran is from when I was about to start 3rd grade. I remember I had just completed my back-to-school shopping. My parents bought me a new bag, books, notebooks, pencil, eraser, and all the other necessary school supplies needed by a 9-year-old to start class. However, just a week before the new academic year began, it was announced on the news that refugee students are not allowed to attend public schools. And just like that, my happiness and excitement to see my friends and to sit in a classroom like any other normal student were shattered into pieces. Growing up, I have always felt something missing from my life, something that I didn't have in common with my other Iranian friends. I never had a place to call home. I am an Afghan through having been born to Afghan parents, but I feel no connection to Afghanistan because I've just never been there. By birth, I should be considered a Pakistani citizen, but I have only spent a couple of years there, so sadly, I cannot call Pakistan my home either. The closest thing to home for me is Iran, where I spent the majority of my life. I have both good and bad memories from my time there. I made some great childhood friends who did not care where I came from, but who I was as a person. To me, that sense of acceptance meant the whole world. Unfortunately, I was also at the same time treated as an outcast and an unwelcome guest, an overstayer who could be kicked out at any sudden moment. No matter how much I loved Iran, deep down I knew I would never be fully accepted as a member of community there. Iran was not a home for my family and I, so we moved on. I was 14 years old when I lost my dad. My youngest brother was only 7. My mom was absolutely destroyed. She had lost her life partner. But even in her grieving, she chose to lead her family. She chose to offshore us because of the threat to our lives in Afghanistan and Pakistan. This is a mother's decision, a woman's decision. And for that, I thank her from the bottom of my heart. We need more women making decisions in conflict zones, protecting those of us who are vulnerable. So we took to Indonesia. When we first arrived in Indonesia, we settled in Cisarua, a hilltop town in Puncak, several hours south of Jakarta, the capital. My first impression about Cisarua was how beautiful it was. The landscape was covered with green shrubs, trees, grasses, tea plantations, and calming greeneries that I was not used to seeing back in the countries I've previously lived in. Not only the greenery, but the hospitality of Indonesians also welcomed us warmly. The people of Indonesia smile brightly, always quick to help, easy to blend in. They are friendly, kind, and gentle. Living among Indonesians felt like a semblance of acceptance that was comfortable. Unfortunately, when it comes to the law, things were not as beautiful. Indonesia has provided us with a safe haven, and its people have been generous beyond expectation. But the rules and regulations set for the refugees by the government are too strict. Despite Indonesia's stunning green environment and natural beauty, refugees live in a hellish situation with no rights. It feels impossible to stay here and integrate. We face this dilemma every day. Do we stay or do we go? Because we cannot work. We cannot travel without permission. We have no access to healthcare, and we have very limited access to education. There is a hopelessness and a helplessness that we carry inside of ourselves each and every day. Sadly, other countries that have been open in welcoming refugees in the past have been closing their borders because of politics that demonizes the other. The politicians in those countries appeal to popular opinion. We, human beings, are simply reduced to dehumanized mass of numbers on the TV screens. We are categorized as subhuman, as cockroaches. Accepting refugees for resettlement has become a political football, and so the resettlement numbers have decreased tremendously in recent years. According to UNHCR, refugees like me face the prospect of staying in Indonesia for a decade or more with nothing to do, and some of us might never be resettled to a third country. Refugees living in Indonesia do not enjoy the same rights as other people living here, because Indonesia has not ratified the 1951 UN Refugee Convention that affords stateless refugees basic rights. We are not economic migrants looking for better jobs or more money. Most of us were well off. Most of us are highly skilled. But all of us were not safe. So here and now, we face two impossibles. The first impossible is integrating in a place where we have no rights. The second impossible is returning to our home countries. Repatriation, returning home, is an existential question for us. Do we live or do we die? Because if we return, we face insecurity and danger to our lives. This constant threat is why we left our countries in the first place. After the first few months in Indonesia, despite all the negativity and limitations, things started to improve. Because instead of cursing the darkness, my older sister Sadiqa and I decided to light a candle and become active members of our community. My sister started volunteering as an English teacher and interpreter, and I co-founded an informal refugee school called Refugee Learning Center, or RLC, in order to provide free education to those who didn't have access to it. My friends and I went through hell and back to set up the school and to mobilize other refugees. But in the end, it was all worth it. Because that school today provides education to 300 students, ranging in age from 6 to 70 years old. Even though I'm one of the co-founders, I had very little to offer when I first started. I was just a teenager who hadn't even finished high school, and I had no prior experience running a community-based center. Basically, I was as useless as the letter G in the word lasagna. But I still felt strongly about the importance of doing good and helping others in need. And I was ready to accept any responsibility that came my way. The first task was to be the school bell. Yes, you heard it right. Not ring the bell, but be the bell. I set an alarm on my phone, and every 45 minutes, my duty would be to go from class to class and inform the teachers that the period was over. I know, not really fun, but necessary. Even though this responsibility seems trivial, it made someone like me feel useful and happy. Over time, I gained more experience. I continued helping people around me, no matter how insignificant I thought my help was, and along the way, I learned so many new things. Soon, I was able to become the photographer and run the school's social media platforms. In turn, I became the communications officer, and then finally, I was elected as the school's principal/manager. All of this happened in only 3 years. I was slowly reaching a point in my life where I felt like everything was going relatively well. Yet, life has a funny way of appending and surprising you when you least expect it. My world turned upside down when my sister was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 2017. I had no idea about mental health disorders. Her symptoms first manifested when she announced that she felt like she was surrounded by spies who were watching her every move, and that she felt like she was being followed by someone everywhere. With no access to mental health professionals, getting help for my sister's condition was no easy task. It was an incredibly tough time for my family and my sister, and I honestly wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Thankfully, over time, I managed to find people who could help, and she's doing much better now, back to her old self. And recently, she has started teaching students again. The strength, courage, and resilience she showed during this difficult time inspired me to do more every single day. After my sister got better, I was pleasantly surprised to one day receive an email from UNHCR saying that they were lobbying the Indonesian government to allow a limited number of refugees to work legally. They were looking for an English to Farsi interpreter, so I applied. And after a slow year of waiting, I was offered the job. Who would have thought that someone like me would get this position, especially in a place where we were not allowed to study or work? It seemed like all of my difficulties and struggles had led me to that moment. I felt amazing, and I'm truly, truly grateful for this opportunity. So friends and fellows, what I want to say is that I'm only one refugee among millions of others walking across this world of ours. We have been through unimaginable pain as refugees. But at the end of the day, our life can be very much similar to yours, full of sadness, suffering, triumph, resilience, and at times, happiness. Even though many label us as illiterate, uncultured, or poor, and burdensome, many of us are extraordinarily talented and skilled individuals. All we need is the chance, the opportunity to prove who we are and what we can do. So tonight, I only ask you to do 3 things. That's it. 3 simple things. Number 1, volunteer. Refugee Learning Center, or RLC, is one of many amazing refugee-led initiatives that are trying their best to change the lives of refugees in Indonesia for the better. Whether you are a teacher, student, journalist, accountant, or just someone who wants to help, there is something for you to do. So reach out to these organizations, volunteer with them, and make a difference. Number 2, advocate. From now on, whenever you hear someone talking negatively about refugees or trying to spread misinformation, challenge them. Talk about what you have seen and heard today. I'm doing my part by raising awareness. But now it is your turn to carry this message forward, and don't let it stop here. Number 3, fund. The refugee-led initiatives are trying very hard to do something positive with their time in Indonesia, but they cannot do it alone. They need your help, and your support and funding, no matter how small, will go a long way. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.